Greetings and welcome to our first tutorial in Unity. I am instructor or professor, either works, Dominic Caroni, and I hope to either refresh you on how to use Unity or provide a tutorial if you've never used it before. As for this week's demonstration, that will include topics such as inputs, interactions, game objects, materials, and prefabs. Again, if you've used Unity before, you may already be familiar with a handful of these topics, but this is going to be specific to using inputs with VR, which may come new to you. So obviously the first thing is to make sure that you have Unity installed, which you can find on Unity's website and go to their downloads page. What will happen is it'll first have you download the Unity Hub, the latest version of the Unity Hub. There you'll be able to manage all of your projects, packages, see all the different versions of Unity that you have installed, etc. You may be asked to sign up for a Unity account in order to use the software. In that case, make sure you choose either a personal or student account, as those are both completely free. And so you'll have your own student or personal license associated with your email account. Now, once you've actually finished installing this, you'll have the Unity Hub. You have your projects, your installations. You also have learning resources, other tutorials that can help you build more skills, like using code, AR apps, etc., beyond what you can just find on YouTube. These are actually published by Unity. Also have like things including community forums or places that you can find assets like the asset store, etc. But for now, I just want to get into making your own project. So these are your tabs again. Projects, this is where you can access them and organize them based on name, date, and other categories. You can have them saved on the cloud if you'd like to access them from different devices. Usually you just open up a project and you open the software and click start a new project, but it doesn't exactly work the same way with Unity because there's a lot of files that have to be installed right off the bat. And instead of a standalone app, the Unity Hub manages projects here. And there's a ton of different versions of Unity, which may depend on things like compatibility or the hardware that you're going to be using this with, or certain packages may not work for newer versions of Unity. So you may have to have multiple versions installed. So if we go to our installs tab, you can see that I have some installed already, the versions from 2019, 2020, and 2021. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to installs, and you'll notice that there's, again, a lot of options for pre-releases, even if you actually have this installed on pre-release editor. What you want to do is click install editor on the top right corner, and you'll have this little pop-up screen. So there's some of these versions that have LTS or long-term support. So these are older ones that you may want to use even in today's date. If you have a project that you're going to be working on for clients, it's a very stable version. You have other versions down here which are not yet stable but close to it, and these are going to be the most recommended to you. You also have these pre-releases that are in alpha or beta, which may have some bugs because they're still in development and getting those all fixed. And you also have archive, which I don't have any versions installed, but it's a repository for older releases. In this case, since our book is focused on version 2022, I'm going to choose the recommended version 2022.3.21F1. And so next, it's going to ask me to add some modules. This includes things like build support for iOS, different operating systems like Linux, Mac, etc., different languages packs. You also have the documentation if you want to download that, but it's usually easiest available online. You may also need some development tools like Microsoft Visual Studio in order to write scripts. So that should also be installed if you don't have it already. So for VR specifically, we're going to choose Android and Windows build support. So there's Windows build support down here, Android at the top. Again, for VR, we'll have Android build support specifically. Hit continue, that you've read all of the above terms, and hit install. Okay, so now that we have installed our editor, we're going to make a new project. So we'll click new project, and it's going to provide us with some templates that we can use. So that'll give you some, it'll set up your project to make it more convenient depending on what type of project you're trying to make. So some of them are for cinematography, animation, but we're going to be using a 3D core template. So we're going to be selecting that one, and we're going to type in a name for our project. So let's just give it a name. We could call it VR base. The book goes with VR base setup, but we can go ahead and call it whatever is convenient for you. You can call it like category, project name, build number, etc. And anyways, we're going to click create project. And with that, Unity should start compiling your project, which will also take a bit of time. So if you haven't seen Unity before, this is what it initially looks like on load. So we have our scene. Again, you just start with a sample scene, and by default, you have a directional light and a camera. So the directional light obviously provides light to our scene and reflects off of objects. You can't really see the difference when you toggle it because there's no objects installed. So let's actually just go ahead and do that first. But first I want to talk a bit about the scene view and things like the user interface. Again, the camera is over here is what you will see when the game's actually running. I should mention that in order to navigate this scene window, you can use right click to look around, kind of rotate your camera. While you're holding right click, you can use WASD controls to move forward, backward, left, and right. You can also use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And if you press shift while moving around, it moves the camera faster. So hopefully that's helpful. This for me is the default layout. You can actually choose some other layouts like 2x3, 4 split. So you have all these different angles to look at objects, but I usually just have the default on, which is this. So you have your scene view and you also have the game view. This is what the camera sees. You can see that you can adjust the scale. You might have multiple cameras or displays, but in our case, we only have one. You can do things like change the screen resolution with this free aspect dropdown. You can change the shading. There's a lot of things you can mess around with that I won't go into. If you want to actually see the details, you can look at the book. This play button will allow you to simulate the game once you have everything set up and able to function. If you click on it right now, nothing's actually going to happen because we don't have any games or dynamics in our scene, so it's just empty. You can just click play again to stop play mode. I'm going to turn my camera off so you can see the entire interface. Up here we have our hierarchy. That includes everything that's in our scene, which for now is just our camera and our directional light. You can focus on one of these objects by just double clicking on it. Let's say I'm off to the side all the way over here. I don't know where my objects are. I can double click. It'll take me there. I can press F to zoom in on it. F is like a focus button. So it'll allow you to get a closer look at these objects. Down here is where we have all of our files. So we have our assets. That's where a lot of our prefabs, materials, animations, things like that may be. We also have some of these default packages that were installed for us automatically, like timelines, Unity user interface, Visual Studio Code, things that you kind of need to get started with your project. I'll show you how to add some assets later that will go into your assets folder, and you can organize them however you please. And up here is an inspector. What the inspector does, it allows you to view the attributes or components of each object. So for example, every game object typically has a transform. The transform gives its location, rotation, and its scale. I can show you a quick example of how to add a game object. Excuse me. So what I can do is I can right click in the hierarchy and go to 3D object and make let's start with a plane. Usually they like to start with a plane. So what it's going to do is it's going to drop this two-dimensional plane. As I move around, you can see it's completely flat. Sometimes, actually most of the time, Unity does not drop these objects in at the origin, so I have to go click on the position and change all of these to 0, 0, 0. As you can see, there's a few ways that you can actually change the position. You can change the number by typing it in here. You can even adjust the number by clicking on where it says Y. I want to change the height, and drag side to side. That allows you to move it. You can also click on these arrows that allow you to move it in one of the 3 axes or along one of the 3 planes. You click on these little squares as well. There's a couple other ways that you can move these. You have like a rotation tool. So if you grip one of these, it allows you to rotate it about that center point and a scale with this tool as well. All these can be changed with the QWERTY keys, the first 5 keys on your keyboard. Q is for move, W, E, R, T, Y. So usually I kind of just keep this on by default, translation, and adjust all of those. You can see this has a, that's this mesh. So what the 3D object is without any kind of textures, it's just a plane. And so again, when I want to add an object, let's say I want to add a cube in here, its mesh will be cube. The mesh renderer kind of determines how we see the object once it's actually rendered, as it implies. You have materials, lighting, some probes that allow for dynamics, which I don't think we get into during this tutorial, and some other settings. So again, I can kind of take this cube and put it on my plane if I'd like. If I want to add a color to it, for example, I can right-click in my assets so that I can reuse this part and create a material. So maybe I want to color the cube red, so I just name it red. And what I could do is I could change the albedo, which is the main color, so that actually makes it red. You can make it look more metallic. It gives a bit of a sphere preview down here, a bit of a preview just on a spherical object. You can change the smoothness, all these other properties about it. And in order to apply this material, I can just drag it onto the cube. Now it exhibits that material. I can do the same thing for the plane. Maybe I want to make it a darker color. So I go to material, and maybe I call it floor. You can name these however you please and organize them in folders for your own sake. Get a darker color, drag it onto the plane. So that's how you apply, how you create new game objects and apply materials to them. A couple things I want to talk about is the Unity Package Manager as well. So that is a window in the editor that allows you to have a library or repository for all of the plugins and assets that you'll be using. So you can add and remove features of the editor based on whatever your project's needs are. So it's kind of like a plugin hub. So in order to access the package manager, you're going to go click on Window in the toolbar and select the Package Manager. And what you're going to see is this window. And this is where we're going to install our VR packages. Yeah, you have all these custom extensions to customize your Unity editor. You can import extensions and packages from a variety of sources that will automatically update from fdisk, git, tarball, and by name, etc. But for this chapter, we're going to be using a custom package called the XR Interaction Toolkit. Now, you also have your build settings, which allows you to create special builds for specific devices. Again, we mentioned using Windows and Android for VR devices. So in order to edit those, we can go to File and click on Build Settings, and it'll give you this window with our little Android guy and Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. And so you can choose to even build for PS4, 5, iOS, for like iPhone, etc. So at the top you have scenes to build, and this section tells you which Unity scenes in your project will be included in your build. So if you have like multiple levels, you can choose those. But right now we only have one scene. That's our sample scene. Those will be included in your build, and we'll discuss how to cover scene management with switching between scenes in a later chapter, if we actually end up doing that demonstration. If you have multiple, maybe you're going through a portal, and when you do, it loads a new scene, like it's a new level, like you transition between different scenes, that may become useful. The current platform in the list is indicated by a Unity logo next to its icon. So right now we are operating in Mac. If we wanted to switch, we could just click on Android and go to Switch Platform. If I go to Edit and go to Project Settings, this will open another window that deals with a lot of aspects of... if I open that, that'll give me a window that deals with a lot of aspects of our game, including things like physics, inputs as well. That's a big one. It's going to determine so for example, if you were making a non-VR game, what our jump button is, what our mouse XY is, WASD, things like that. By default, you see some of these are already set. Like jump is the space button for our positive button. Negative button means let go. Positive means you pressed down onto the button. Negative means let go. You also have XYZ, things like that. If you wanted to actually set it, I could say my positive button instead of joystick button 0 is Z, and it'll make it whatever key you're using on keyboard. All right, so now that I've discussed a few basic things and what your settings are, allowing you to customize your editor, let's actually set up our VR package. So we want to make sure that we have our modules that we need. So Android build support for standalone headsets and Windows for PC-based headsets. Now, once we've made the new project, we are going to go to the plugin manager. Go to project settings again, and go to XR plugin management. If I click install plugin management, it's going to do all of the annoying tasks for us when we're trying to build VR experiences. And so you're going to see a plugin providers that you can enable for various flowworks like Oculus, OpenXR, and Unity Mock HMD. OpenXR is a plugin that supports most headsets, and they're moving to this one because it provides a universal input system that can be translated across all devices. So whether you have HTC Vive or Oculus, etc., this will allow you, it'll be compatible for all of those. So here I can select OpenXR, and it's going to install those packages for me. And we're going to have to wait a bit for it to compile, and it'll automatically switch your project to the new input system. All right, next it's going to give you this warning. This project is using the new input system package, but the native backend, platform backends for the new input system are not enabled. So we're going to have to click restart, and that will restart the editor. And we'll save our changes to this. Now when the project opens again, it might show some errors to the console. We go here, at least one interaction profile must be added. Click edit. It will take me here. And this is because we have not added an interaction profile yet. And the one we will use is based on the headset that we're building for. Now, if you notice, my enabled interaction profiles list is empty, so I'm going to need to add one. And in this case, I personally have a Oculus headset, so I'm going to have to go with the Oculus Touch Controller profile. I believe through the textbook they add a few others, including HTC Vive controller profile and Valve Index. Again, if you own either of those headsets, which I'm hoping that when you're taking this class, you do own one of these headsets to test on, at least one of you, for developing this project. You can choose, again, Oculus, Valve, iGaze, HTC Vive, Chronos, any of those that you would like to add. Next, we have a render mode that you can choose between single pass instance and multi-pass. So single pass takes one rendered image and produces that for both of your eyes. So maybe that will run a bit faster, but you're not going to have depth perception. So if you choose the multi-pass, it does 2 render calls to make a separate image for each eye separately. So one provides a better virtual reality experience, one's more immersive, but it uses more processing power. So it depends on whether speed is a concern or immersion. But we're going to go with multi-pass. So a lot of standalone headsets also use Android devices. And if I go to the XR plugin management for Android, I can click on Oculus here. It will allow compatibility standalone Oculus. Because when you're using an Oculus headset as PC based, that's through Windows, but if you're using Oculus as standalone, that's operating on its own Android system. And if you look down here, we actually have an Oculus tab now, and we can also choose multi-pass for our rendering mode to, again, give us 2 different angles of view. So now that we've installed that, you'll see an XR folder in your project window down here. So this contains all of your general settings in a way that Unity can communicate to your headset. So you're going to need to install the XR interaction toolkit so that the headset can communicate with Unity. So that's the next step. In order to install the XR interaction toolkit, we are going to open the package manager, Windows up here on the window tab, and go to package manager again. So we could just install the package directly from add package by name. And what we're going to do is we're going to search up pretty much the Git URL. Well, both essentially work. You do com.unity.xr.toolkit. Oh, I forgot interaction. It should be com.unity.xr.interaction toolkit. I'm gonna hit add here. It's actually present if you scroll down somewhere near the bottom over here. And it's gonna take a bit to load, but we'll be able to install it once this finishes. All right, now that it's installed, we can check since it gives us an option to remove it. So now that's done, we can click exit. And this package is gonna give us some pre-installed interactions to use right out of the box. Again, like teleportation, grabbing objects, clicking on objects. That's just to name a few. We also need to have some samples installed as well. The book does some examples with those, so we can't forget these. I believe they are starter assets, including a default set of input actions. So those input actions are going to allow us to interact using our headset. Click import. And you should now have a samples folder. So if there's any other things that we need to install from our toolkit, you can import hands interaction demo if you want to see a demonstration and things like that. Now, you'll be able to go into samples, XR interaction toolkit in our current version, along with some starter assets. So this is going to include some things like the XRI default inputs and some interaction samples. All right, so I'm actually using an Oculus Quest headset that I have here, and I hope that you're familiar enough, if you are using Oculus, to hook it up to your computer using the Quest link. I actually have the cable set up so that it can run PC based. If you have any further issues with this, what you need to do is you need to go to your general settings and click allow on unknown sources in your general tab, or you may need to go to settings, system developer, and turn on USB connection that I have like this, and click allow when a prompt asks you to connect the headset, and then you will allow USB debugging always from this computer if it asks you to check that box. Now what's going to happen is if I press play while this project is open, this is what's going to happen. It's going to start compiling, and if I actually turn on the headsets, the game actually ends up running. It's going to actually produce the image in my headset from the camera once it finishes compiling. You can actually see through the screen that it renders my scene. The issue is when I move the headset, it actually does not change this angle at all. As you can see, if I were to like turn my head, it just shows me the same picture. So we actually have to implement our XR Unity Toolkit input manager to help us do that. What we need to do is we need to add what's called an XR rig. So if I right click on the hierarchy here and add XR and XR origin, this is going to be centered at well, it actually first of all has its own camera. It's attached to the main camera, which is automatically added to it. We can actually delete this old camera here. So as you notice, it has a camera offset, main camera, and also our left and right controllers, which are highlighted here. Each controller will have their own respective settings. Usually we're just going to copy and paste these with the same values, just named left and right. What I can do is I can actually choose a preset for these. So we have XR default left controller. I'm going to double click that. And this is pretty much a set of inputs. If you look here, we have XRI default input actions. So it's going to allow us to get all of our buttons here. We have left hand position, left hand rotation, tracking for actually moving your hands, left hand interaction when that comes to clicking on objects, picking up objects, things like that. So we go to the right controller object here, and I will click this for the preset and click on right. And it also gives me this window here, which will allow me to select how these are calculated. Vector 3 fallback, you have quaternion fallback. Quaternion and Vector 3 are different data types that are used in C Sharp. So vector 3 is just an X, Y, and Z. That's just how it's going to be calculating your inputs for your right hand and your left hand. So I don't think there's anything that we have to edit in here at the moment. Now if I hit play again, let's see what happens. I'm going to turn my camera back on. Now that I've actually given those two input managers and I've set up my, now that I've given my right and left hand those presets for their controllers, and I've also added the camera, it looks like nothing actually, oh, here we are. When I actually put on the headset, I can turn my head. I can turn my head now, as shown in the scene. So if I actually zoom out, you can see that this is where my head is at, and you may be able to see my controllers. And oh yeah, they have raycasters on them. If I click on game, you can actually see what I'm seeing. I'm actually floating in this space above the plane because that's where I installed this, and I didn't set it to the origin. But these little arrows are attached to my hands, and I'm still unable to move, which we will be able to do that in a later tutorial. So for now, I'm going to move my XR rig down to the origin so that I'm no longer floating. This camera offset is going to allow me to be a little bit higher so that my head isn't stuck at the on the floor, for example. Now, if I give myself, let's say I want to be able to see my hands, there is a hand model that is included, but for now I'll just give myself a couple of cubes. Let me duplicate this with Control D. Control D allows you to duplicate an object. Let's bring them back to 0, 0, 0 by clicking on their position, changing them back to 0, 0, 0. Where they go, I can double click to find them. Let's say I want my hands a little bit smaller than that, so let's make the scale 0.2. I just click on each X, Y, and Z scale and change it to 0.2. I'm going to duplicate it again so I don't have to re-enter those values. Now what I want is, notice that they have little arrows here. This means that the objects, like the main camera, the left controller, and the right controller, those are all children of this camera offset. So that means that they are attached to their parent. So that can work with object inheritance, but more specifically in this case, it allows us to have their transform be relative to whatever their parent is. So if I want this cube to follow my left hand, I will put it on left controller. If I wanted to put it on, follow my right hand, I'll put it on right controller. So I may need to reset the position again because that may have changed. Okay, so now if I hit play again, let it compile, load, and now my hands are giant cubes, which you can't see right now. Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, if you look in game mode now, my hands are giant cubes. So I can actually see how they are rotating and translating as I move my remote controller. All right, so that's essentially an overview of how to actually set up the headset, get all of the toolkit packages installed, and set up Unity. The book does offer a way to test on a device if you don't have an Oculus that is installed, or sorry, running on the on a computer with a link cable. If you were to do it wirelessly on the standalone system, you'll have to switch your build settings to Android, which is on page 59 of your textbook. It says, as mentioned, Linux and Mac do not support VR experiences in Unity Editor. You can test them on a device. So if you have a Linux or Mac, you're going to have to follow this as well. You'll have to go to your build settings in the file menu. I'll switch back over to my screen to show you. If you go to File and go to Build Settings, you want to click on Android, and you will switch the platform. And so your Unity icon will jump from Windows, Linux, or Mac to Android. Before you select Build and Run, you'll want to make sure that the headset is actually connected to the computer. And after you build it to the device, you'll be able to see that experience in action. All right, so VR experiences again are very powerful and lead to powerful immersive experiences. And fortunately, Unity has a relatively simple way of setting this up. But we went over the basics of how to use the Unity Hub, how we can easily use that to install the packages we need for whatever platform, whatever version of Unity that we need, etc. And then we created a scene with a simple plane and object, just a quick, I guess, either review or intro to how to install game objects into your scene, how the hierarchy works, and a little bit about transforms. So with our simple scene, we were able to look around with the headset on. We actually can't move yet. We'll cover that in the next section. But still, this is a big step forward if you're just starting from the bare basics. If you have any technical questions for me, maybe you're experimenting with a different device or you run into some kind of difficulty following this tutorial, got stuck somewhere, let me know. There is also plenty of open sources out there and tutorials that you can follow that may give you some other potential insight. But I hope you got something out of this video, and I'll see you in the next chapter.